law-abiding, Indigenous, Black, and other racialized peoples.
A Toronto judge says not only do random police checks harm communities, they don't help lower crime rates. And now he wants them banned in Ontario. Carding happens when police randomly stop someone and ask them for personal information. It's become very controversial in Ontario, and today, Justice Michael Tulloch laid out the reasons why he wants to see it end once and for all. Farah Morelli is live for us tonight at Toronto Police Headquarters. And Farah, this report is something the previous provincial government asked for.
That's right, Chris. You might remember back in 2016, as this issue was continuing to draw up more controversy, the Liberal government brought in regulations to try to change this. It implemented regulations to try to prevent someone from being carded on the basis of them being Black or a visible minority. We wanted to see how effective those changes were, so in comes Justice Michael Tulloch. He's tasked with traveling the province and speaking to 2,200 people, including police forces, and he comes up with this 300-plus page report. The most striking recommendation, as you mentioned there, or striking finding, rather, is that random street checks don't bring down crime. He also makes a number of other recommendations, including broadening protections during police street checks, also standardizing training for officers on how to deal with street checks. Today, there's a sense of cautious optimism among people in this community, as well as people who say they've been targeted by police in the past.
These days, Asante Houghton walks the streets of Toronto with a sense of confidence. That wasn't always the case.
I once had an officer tell me I left my car too quickly and I looked dangerous.
Houghton says he started getting carded by police when he was 13 years old in Regent Park.
It's a scary situation to be in because, you kind of sort of never know where the interaction might be going. And so the thing that goes through your head is, how can I not escalate the situation? How can I, get out of this situation safe? And, as someone who's never really been in trouble or anything like that, it was always just, it felt like a violation of my rights.
Stops must be based on more than a hunch or spidey sense.
Today, Justice Michael Tulloch spoke publicly for the first time about his damning report. It found that carding has little to no value as a law enforcement tool.
Random carding should end. Now, in my extensive analysis, I was unable to find an example of a situation where police's inability to randomly stop people to conduct street checks for general intelligence gathering, or as I've referred to it today, inability to randomly card people, would interfere with their ability to effectively fulfill their duties.
Tulloch differentiated between street checks and carding in his report, explaining there are instances where street checks are warranted, but not carding, which he says is random and arbitrary.
Justice Tulloch, I think, did a very thorough job.
That's something that was welcomed by the Toronto Police Association. The president hopes the government will listen to their recommendations that involve more money, resources, and better bias training.
When we look at this report, is it going to be another report that sits on the shelf and gathers dust? Or are the government's going to give us the resources that we need to effectively train people and effectively deploy people?
Houghton says he's read the recommendations and is optimistic, but says there's still a sense of frustration over why it took so long to get here.
It's good to have this sort of validation for what we've been saying, in the sense that, the report states that carding has not had any significant positive impact on policing or crime prevention. But again, this is something that we've been saying for a long time.
All right, so far we have this report, we've got the recommendations. So what happens next?
Well, Chris, that's the question that's more difficult to answer. We know this report has been sent to the provincial government, and the Minister of Public Safety and Correctional Services said today they are reviewing, and it's really up to them to decide whether to implement these recommendations or not. But keep in mind, this is a different government in power now than the one that ordered this report. That was the previous Wynne government. We are now dealing and working with a Conservative government here, so it remains to be seen as to whether they actually take these recommendations and what they do, if anything at all.
Okay, thanks for this tonight, Farah.
I'm Adrian Chung, and we're following a disturbing case of human trafficking right here in Toronto, where many of the victims are being lured online and on dating apps. And police say it's happening a lot more than you think. We'll have that story coming up.
An overnight shooting near Greenwood and Gerrard has left at least one person with serious injuries and several cars with bullet holes.
It's just like gunfire, bang, 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 bang.
The shooting took place at 2:30 this morning. Police say the victim may have taken himself to hospital. Bullets punctured cars and smashed windows. One bullet even went into a home, and casings scattered the street. Police say it's possible people in different vehicles were shooting at each other. And a man in his 20s is in hospital tonight after being shot in a busy Mississauga plaza. It happened near the corner of Derry Road and Airport Road around 10 last night. Police found the man in the plaza's parking lot. Paramedics rushed him to a trauma center with life-threatening injuries. His condition has improved, and those injuries are no longer considered critical. Police are asking any 9 police officers have died by suicide in Ontario within the last year alone. This has the province's chief coroner asking, are there underlying issues that need to be addressed? He announced a review into their deaths today. The chief coroner says he will convene an expert panel within the next few weeks for the review. The plan is to assess medical and police records of all 9 officers, looking for commonalities. The chief coroner hopes to have a report ready by summer, but work has already begun. Records have been pulled and families were notified. This move from the coroner's office follows an internal OPP review announced this summer after 3 members died by suicide, including Sergeant Sylvain Routier on July 31st. Sergeant Routier's widow, Sarah, is here with me now from Belleville. Sarah, I'm so sorry for your loss, but I appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate that.
Sarah, what have the last 6 months been like for you and your family?
It's obviously been a very difficult time for us. We are trying to find a new normal without Sylvain in our lives and trying to move forward and move on. It's very difficult when you lose a loved one to suicide, and we are all sticking together and trying to support one another at this moment.
Knowing that your husband's death has sparked these reviews and may be able to help other officers who are struggling, perhaps many of them struggling in silence, how does that make you feel?
It's obviously a little bit bittersweet. It makes me feel really good that the coroner's office has decided to look into these suicides in the province. But on the other side, it's too late for my husband. So hopefully the recommendations that come out of the report can try and help other people.
And one thing I noticed that the panel will be looking for is information about the officers, particularly from the family. So what are you hoping to share about your husband?
Yeah, I'm probably going to share with the panel a little bit about his life and his work experience. Sylvain was the type of person that everybody would have been the one least expected to deal with a mental illness and commit suicide. And he was a strong person and a really good police officer. And I think that's part of what's difficult to understand sometimes is how does something like that happen to a person like Sylvain. So hopefully we'll get a bit of answers too whenever the coroner examines the commonalities between all the police officers' suicides, and maybe that hopefully will help other people.
And speaking about those commonalities, I know that you've spoken with some other policing families about this. What commonalities or trends have you noticed?
I think the main trend is there's a huge stigma, not only with police officers, but with first responders in general, that they go to work every day and they see some really difficult things, and they try to be strong, and they don't want to come home and tell their loved ones some of the stuff that they've had to deal with, and they internalize it. And I think that builds up over many, many years of not dealing with the hard things that they have to see. And I believe that's what's led to Sylvain having depression and anxiety and his eventual suicide, is that stigma of what he had to deal with at work and not wanting to share with other people that he was struggling and not wanting to reach out for help. He internalized it and kept it to himself, and I think that's that will be a commonality that we'll find, is that a lot of people, that have mental health concerns to do with first responders. It's them having to go to work every day and just do their job and not wanting to show that there is an issue or they are having a struggle.
Well, I can't even imagine what you've been going through for the past 6 months, but I appreciate you speaking with us tonight. Thanks a lot and have a great night.
Thank you very much for having me.
An alleged sex trafficking ring has been busted by Toronto police. Detectives have arrested 3 people who they say forced a woman into the sex trade after meeting her on the dating app Tinder. As Adrian Chung tells us, police say social media is now playing a growing and major role in human trafficking cases.
21 charges in all. Joshua Hamblett, Shoshana Wilkins, and Keegan Profit are all accused of human trafficking. But police say that only begins to describe what the victim faced. Police allege the accused met the woman over the dating app Tinder last year, forced into sex work, with the trio allegedly taking all of her earnings. We spoke to an investigator with Toronto Police's Human Trafficking Unit. CBC News is not identifying him because of his work as an undercover officer.
It's the whole premise of modern-day slavery. In some circumstances, within 24 to 48 hours, the person will already be lured into the sex trade and actually working.
The officer says social media plays a key role, from how victims are targeted to how their services are sold online.
That's where the main and initial recruitment and procuring of a vulnerable person does happen.
Personal ads have now been removed from Craigslist, but
other sites have taken the place of Craigslist, where personal ads are allowed. In fact, they advertise it right on the site. And 2 clicks in, you can find pages and pages of escort listings. But police say that it's difficult to figure out which of these ads are people doing sex work of their own free will and which ones are being trafficked.
Front-of-line workers say it's often a long way out for victims once they've been held captive by pimps.
It could be because they say, if you leave, I will post your naked pictures on social media, or I'll tell your family, I'll tell your friends, I'll out you.
And the officer says human trafficking is one of the most widespread crimes in the city, hiding in plain sight.
I've been in high-risk units such as the drug squad, organized crime, and our gun and gang unit, and I've never been as busy as a police officer as I have been here in the last 3 years.
Police believe there may be more victims in this latest case and are asking anyone with information to reach out to the police's Human Trafficking Unit. Adrian Chung, CBC News, Toronto.
Mount Pleasant Cemetery, where I am right now, was established as a public trust back in the 1800s. But for the past 3 decades, it's been run more like a private corporation. A group of citizens wanted to change that, and they won their case. Coming up, I'll have more on the judge's ruling.
Time now for our first look at your weather forecast with Nick Cernkovich. And Nick, finally, a legitimate reason to wear sunglasses.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Chris. Actually, I even left the jacket in the building when I went out for a walk
You're
earlier
brave.
today. Yeah, you know, I'm not ashamed to say that temperatures actually went up a little bit above what I had forecast yesterday. But you know what, I'm sure we all enjoyed it. We hit 8 degrees today. I was forecasting 5, but just with the sunshine and everything, got a little bit warmer. Right now we're sitting at 3 degrees though in the city of Toronto. Thing to watch though is we've got clear skies tonight, and that's going to make for a couple of things here. We've got clear skies, we've got light winds, and we've got temperatures that are dropping below 0 tonight. All of that combined is going to lead to the risk for some freezing fog or maybe some patchy freezing drizzle through the early morning hours tomorrow. And that means the risk for some icy roads. It should burn off though by the late morning, and then into the afternoon we're looking at a mix of sun and cloud. Forecast tonight down to -3 degrees. Watch for icy roads tomorrow morning. 5 for tomorrow, and then a bit of a mixed bag for Monday. I've got details on that coming up in just a bit, Chris.
All right, thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
She had expressed an interest in Ryan before, and she kind of really floated the idea, and it's kind of difficult to say no, really.
Talk about testing a family bond. We connected with the father-daughter rowing team traveling across the Atlantic. Their incredible story is coming up later in the show. For the last few weeks, we've been looking back at the biggest stories of the last year. Well, tonight, November 2018 is in the spotlight.
I moved my family twice for this company, and they do this to me. It's terrible.
You have no products allocated for Oshawa after December in 2019.
A big blow to Oshawa as General Motors announces it'll close its plant in the city. The move will impact thousands of GM employees and workers at related businesses. GM says the closure is part of a global restructuring plan. They'll shut down operations by the end of this year. They say the wheels of justice turn slowly, but after a year of court appearances for Bruce MacArthur, the accused serial killer learned he'll stand trial for murder in 2020. The trial is expected to last 3 to 4 months. Allegations of hazing and sexual assault rocked St. Michael's College School after video surfaced allegedly showing students involved in violent attacks. 7 students were charged, and the scandal led to the resignation of the school's principal and president. Varsity basketball was then canceled, and this year's football program has been punted.
I've asked Tony to resign from caucus.
Tony Clement admitted he shared sexually explicit pictures and a video that resulted in an extortion attempt against him, which got the RCMP involved. The Parry Sound Muskoka MP, who is married, resigned as a Conservative MP and now sits as an independent.
It is concerning that there's this type of interplay between a couple of officers.
A Niagara police officer shot a colleague in November. It happened in Pelham near St. Catharines. The province's Special Investigations Unit says one officer fired his weapon multiple times. They wouldn't confirm there was an altercation between the 2 cops. The gunfire happened while officers were at the scene of a collision that had occurred a few days before.
Ron Taverner couldn't apply because his rank was too low. Then 2 days later, the requirements suddenly changed.
And Toronto Police Superintendent Ron Taverner was named the head of the OPP, but the move was condemned when it was revealed the qualifications of the job had been changed. Taverner didn't meet the original requirements for the posting. The PC government said it lowered the qualifications to attract a wider field of candidates. Taverner, a longtime friend of Premier Doug Ford, asked that his appointment be delayed until a number of investigations run their course.
She's turned into a giant killer in the world of tennis. I'm Lorenda Redekop. Bianca Andreescu has beaten 2 of the world's top players.
I believe that anything is possible, and tonight I think I did the impossible, so I don't even know what to say.
And she has even bigger dreams. She's in New Zealand playing again tonight in the semifinals. Her parents have been watching it all from here. I'll have more on her amazing climb coming up.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Well, she has done it again. 18-year-old Bianca Andreescu has stunned the tennis world, this time defeating tennis royalty Venus Williams in New Zealand. It's her second big win in just 2 days. Lorenda Redekop has more on the Mississauga teen serving upset after upset on the international stage.
Another magical night for Bianca Andreescu.
Another night, another huge win for Bianca Andreescu, coming from behind to beat Venus Williams.
I believe that anything is possible, and tonight I think I did the impossible, so I don't even know what to say.
So this would be her first trophy when she was 9 years old.
At her home just north of Toronto, the office is a shrine to her tennis victories. Her parents FaceTimed with her after last night's win.
She couldn't believe herself. She thought, maybe I'm dreaming. No, you're not dreaming. This is reality. This is real.
For her mom, the pressure is just too much.
My wife doesn't watch usually.
No.
She's so emotional. And no, she usually I watch it by myself. And I tell her the score.
Her coach is thrilled with his young star's success.
I'm a big believer in Bianca. I really believe in her potential, her tennis potential, her physical, and her mind. She's got a really powerful mind. So I know she's going to do great things in tennis. Maybe it's a little bit earlier than I thought, but that's totally fine.
At Tennis Canada, they've seen Andreescu's game improve and aren't as surprised as she is.
She has no weakness for me. That's very important, now to be ready on the technical side.
She beat the world number 3 yesterday, then Venus Williams early today. So what does the future hold?
In the short term, I think the goal of Bianca is to be a top 15 in the world, and I would say in the long term is to be top 10 in the near future.
Bianca herself has even bigger dreams, obvious in the poster she signed for her parents. First up, though, she has a semi-final match to play Saturday in New Zealand. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Vaughan, Ontario.
So we would have loved to interview Bianca today, but she's, of course, resting up for her next match. We actually did interview her a year and a half ago, though, when she got a surprise wildcard berth in the Rogers Cup here in Toronto, and it was clear she was on the right path.
I've came here to watch every final I remember since 2010, I think. I remember I watched Belinda Bencic beat Serena, and at that moment I told myself I want to do what she's doing. Every year I come here like it's at home, so it's an amazing feeling, and with the crowd to be for me, I think it's really going to help me throughout my matches.
And we might be able to get a chance to see her this summer at the Rogers Cup. The top women players return to the Aviva Centre at York University this August, and tickets go on sale later this month. Now, earlier this week, I told you about an incredible father-daughter duo from Burlington. John and Libby Beeden are rowing across the Atlantic Ocean. And when I heard they were nearly halfway, I knew we had to connect and find out how it was going. Sorry, no Skype or FaceTime. They only have a dicey satellite phone connection, but I think Libby explains pretty well how grueling this trip is.
Every day is quite different because it all depends on the weather, really. But mostly during the day, like when it's light out, we're doing hour on, hour off. So you row for an hour, and then you get an hour break and you can eat, sleep, and do whatever you need to do, really. And then during the night, we try to do a few longer shifts, getting a bit more sleep. But, I mean, the weather the other day was that bad that we had to do hour on, hour off in the night as well.
Yeah, I saw you wrote in your blog that you had by far the most horrendous night of them all. Can you explain to me what happened?
Basically, the current was just going against us as well as the wind. So it just felt like you were rowing into cement. And after about 20 minutes, you were just exhausted. You couldn't row for more than an hour.
John, you're the first person to row solo, nonstop, continent to continent, from North America to Australia. And after that trip, I saw you said, quote, never again. So what changed? Why are you doing this?
Well, because my daughter asked me to. If anybody else did that, I would have said no. And I was on the boat for 7 months when I got to Australia. And that's a long time in a very tiny environment, damp and just eating basically grown-up baby food is what you're eating. I didn't see any point in doing anything else. Libby had expressed an interest in rowing before, and she kind of refloated the idea, and it's kind of difficult to say no, really.
John, some parents in particular have been commenting online on our stories about you guys, talking about or questioning how you could do this with your daughter. What do you say to them?
It isn't the safest thing to do in the world, but we're very focused on staying safe.
And so when you land in Antigua, what's the first thing you're going to do?
So the thing you crave is a bed that doesn't rock, a shower, clean sheets, and some crunchy food, even if it's just a green salad. That's all you want. Or maybe even something refrigerated, ice cream maybe.
And they are getting ever closer to that ice cream. John tells me the worst is nearly over. The plan originally was to go from Portugal to Miami, but the beginning was so dangerous with such strong winds and surf. They don't have enough supplies to get to Miami, so now they'll have to row to the island nation of Antigua. Still quite the journey ahead of them, some 3,000 kilometers to go. But John says starting in about a week, conditions are expected to improve, and we, of course, wish them the best of luck. Stay with us. We'll be right back. A big win this week for a group of citizens fighting to reclaim over 500 hectares of cemetery space. Bought as a public trust in the 1800s, the Mount Pleasant Cemetery stayed that way for about a century. But in the late 1980s, it went private. Now a judge has ruled that the space is indeed a public entity and must be treated as such. Kelda Yoon is live outside Mount Pleasant for us tonight. And Kelda, you tried to get into this alleged public space. What happened?
Chris, that's right. I was actually inside about 10-15 minutes ago, but I was told to leave, that the cemetery was closed and that I was on private property. This despite the fact that just a couple of days ago, the Superior Court of Ontario ruled that the cemetery was in fact a public entity and it was a public space. So we're outside right now. Now, it was 5 years ago that the citizens group Friends of Toronto Cemeteries was founded. What they wanted to do was they wanted the court to affirm that this cemetery and other cemeteries under the Mount Pleasant group of cemeteries, which includes many across the GTA, that they were all actually public entities instead of private corporations, which they were being run as. And on New Year's Eve, they won their case.
I am overwhelmed with joy that this amazing 1,222 acre urban forest, public trust, historical Toronto place is returned to the people of Toronto.
Margot Boyd fought hard to see this day.
It's my great-great-great-grandfather, and his portrait is sitting over the fireplace at Osgoode Hall.
It's a fight that's also personal. Boyd's great-great-great-grandfather was the Attorney General in 1826 when he helped to establish the cemetery as a public trust.
It was to be a secular cemetery that was available to everybody, and the citizens of Toronto were also supposed to be involved in the governing of the trust.
Since 1987, though, the Mount Pleasant group of cemeteries, which grew to include 10 cemeteries across the GTA, had stopped treating it as a charitable trust.
And then they stopped allowing the public elections, and then they declared that they were commercial, privately owned cemeteries.
This sign making that clear. But this week, Ontario Superior Court Justice Sean Dunphy sided with Boyd and her group, ruling that the cemeteries do belong to the public. Pamela Taylor, a Toronto lawyer, says this means public oversight should be restored.
So this is really key, that as a public trust, this is established for the public benefit. The public has a say in how it's managed, and ultimately we know that the philosophy underlying it will be for the public's ultimate benefit.
The judge ruled the current directors of the Mount Pleasant group of cemeteries were all not validly appointed, and none have the authority to appoint a replacement. He also ordered that residents be allowed to demand a public meeting where other candidates could be considered. In a statement, the Mount Pleasant group of cemeteries said, "These court proceedings pertain to several pieces of special act legislation, the most pertinent pieces to the case being between 150 to 170 years old. We are disappointed in the court's ruling and will appeal the decision." Boyd, meanwhile, says she is hopeful the ruling will be upheld.
So she's buried here too.
Besides this one, the Mount Pleasant group of cemeteries, they control 9 other cemeteries, including ones in Vaughan, Pickering, Richmond Hill, Oshawa, and Brampton. Chris?
Kelda?
What did trout and Christmas have in common? Coming up, I'll tell you how these trees may be saving their habitat.
Some LCBO stores will be open later than normal. In December, the government changed the rules to allow alcohol to be sold from 9 to 11, 7 days a week. About 50 stores opted in, and that has the union raising concerns over safety.
A couple of bottles of vodka is not worth getting stabbed over. Indeed, a lot of stores are a lot more busier than they were now. If you're going to have extended hours, how are you going to ensure safety of customers and staff and prevent shoplifting?
Toronto police estimate over $200,000 worth of goods have been stolen from LCBO locations in the city between August and December. The union president says workers have lots of ideas on how security can be improved. They want a sit-down with either the premier or a cabinet minister to share their thoughts. Social media influencers are becoming the go-to for celebrity endorsements. Even Canada's Public Health Agency is using the PR strategy. The government agency just tapped a Quebec influencer to warn young people about opioids. As Hannah Thibodeau reports, it's a strategy other parts of the federal government are exploring as well.
22-year-old Florence Lavoie's French language YouTube videos are slice of life stuff. Makeup tips, dating advice, even one explaining why she hasn't worn a bra for 2 years, which picked up 10 million views.
Words of wisdom right here.
Lavoie's bubbly on-camera personality has earned her more than 85,000 subscribers.
It's like the new era of celebrities, if I can say. People look up to us and they'll take our advice.
She even grabbed the attention of the federal government. The Public Health Agency paid Lavoie $6,600 to produce a short online video warning young people about the dangers of opioid use.
Pour parler de drogue.
Lavoie says the logic behind the recruitment is obvious to anyone under 30.
Younger people don't really watch television anymore and don't get really connected to ads like that because they don't really speak to them.
2 other government departments report using social media influencers since 2015. Public Safety spent just over $181,000 to promote things like protecting personal information online. The trend is only going to accelerate because it works.
There's definitely potential problems. If we're selecting social influencers based on their reach, but their reach has actually been manipulated by a bunch of bot accounts that have been created to inflate how important they seem, we end up accidentally investing resources in something that's not actually going to pay out.
For Lavoie, she sees the benefits of using influencers like her and hopes the government continues to do so. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. President Donald Trump held a tense meeting with newly elected Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and other top Democrats. They're pushing Trump to end the partial government shutdown, but the president is digging in on his demand to get funding for his border wall. Stephen D'Souza reports.
After their second meeting in a week, Democrats said discussions with the president to end the government shutdown were lengthy and contentious.
We recognize on the Democratic side that we really cannot resolve this until we open up government, and we made that very clear to the president.
We will build the wall.
Democrats say Trump, who tweeted this video last night, emphasizing what he sees as the threat at the border, held firm to his position.
He told the president we needed the government open. He resisted. In fact, he said he'd keep the government closed for a very long period of time, months or even years.
I think it may have been somewhat contentious, but I think it was very productive.
Asked if he really thinks he would keep hundreds of thousands of government workers off the job that long so a border wall gets built, Trump didn't hesitate.
Absolutely, I said that. I don't think it will, but I am prepared. I don't call it a shutdown. I call it doing what you have to do for the benefit and for the safety of our country.
Last night, Democrats used their new control of the House to pass legislation to fund the government.
The bill is passed.
But no wall money. A bill Trump has said he won't sign.
I'm very proud of doing what I'm doing.
Today, Trump again said Mexico will pay for the wall. Using a dubious economic explanation, he claimed the money will come via the new free trade deal involving Mexico and Canada.
What we save on that just with Mexico will pay for the wall many times over.
Trump raised the specter of crime, gangs, and even an unproven claim of terrorists crossing the southern border to make his case today. And he admitted he's thought about using executive power and going around Congress.
I may do it, but we can call a national emergency and build it very quickly, and it's another way of doing it.
But Trump says he prefers a negotiated settlement. So he's asked staffers from both sides to meet over the weekend to hammer out a deal, one that he says must include the wall. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
As we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. We'll be right back. Decorations gone, branches bare. A Christmas tree is a sad sight after the holidays. But as the Grinch says, one man's garbage is another man's potpourri. Conservation Halton is beginning to stockpile hundreds of those trees. And when the weather gets warm, they'll be put to another use. Taylor Simmons shows us how they'll be used to make creeks and rivers healthier.
Although it doesn't look like much from here, there's actually quite a lot happening under the ice.
Those wooden stakes across the water hold down dozens of Christmas trees. They mark the beginning of a new bank along Bronte Creek.
We would push them all down nicely into the bottom of the creek, and we would anchor in kind of a fabric of a whole bunch of Christmas trees here. And then within a couple of years, you won't even see these trees. It'll just be earthen bank, just like we're standing on right here.
It's a merry solution to fix the local habitat. From the 70s to 90s, a trailer park operated in Courtcliff Park, and the owners dug out parts of the creek.
We believe it may have been widened by as much as 5 times its historical width. We have a greater surface area for the sun to warm up the water, and when this water is very, very warm, it's not habitable to sensitive species.
Species like brook trout, whose populations dropped. They can only handle water temperatures up to 18 degrees Celsius.
Brook trout are kind of known as canaries in the coal mine, so if brook trout are happy and the water is cold enough for them, then we're actually helping to protect a whole range of species as well.
Enter Christmas trees. Bundled together, the tight branches and needles catch sediment passing through the water and rebuild the creek banks, including this huge 20 by 40 foot addition made up of almost 200 Christmas trees.
Here we've started to see earth on top of the Christmas trees and plants growing.
The trees work so well, they're not the only ones using them. Credit Valley Conservation runs a similar program with the Credit River, rebuilding and in turn, cooling the water. By working with landfills, tree nurseries, and corporate donors, Conservation Halton hopes to gather 400 trees in the coming weeks for use this year.
If you want to do your part, they're always looking for volunteers in the spring and summer to come and put the Christmas trees into the creeks and rivers around the region. Taylor Simmons, CBC News, Carlisle.
Nick Cernkovich is back with another look at your weather forecast. And I remember you saying that the weekend was going to be a nice one.
Yeah, at least the first half of it, Chris. Definitely sunshine, but what we're looking at here is a bit of a cool down heading into Sunday and then a mixed bag for Monday. However, let's forget about that for a sec. Talk warm weather. We've got warm weather tomorrow, and we certainly had warm weather today, and I mean in a relative sense. The average daytime highs, just to kind of put this in perspective, minus 1.6 for the city of Toronto. That's for today. The average lows, close to minus 10. Of course, nowhere near the records, but we did pretty well today. Temperatures hitting 8 degrees in the city of Toronto, although under clear skies, we're already down to 3 degrees, and we're going to drop below the 0 mark as we head through the next few hours into tonight. And that leads to the risk for some freezing fog through the overnight. Nothing to show you on the satellite radar imagery. It is clear, and it generally remains clear through tonight. With that, the temperature dissipates, and some early morning fog may develop across the GTA. At least in some places, we'll see it. And with that, as temperatures are below 0, we've got the recipe for some freezing fog in there as well, and potentially some patchy freezing drizzle as well. So icy roads, possibility through the morning hours at least. And then by the time we hit the afternoon, the clouds start to dissipate. We'll have a mix of sun and cloud as we head through tomorrow afternoon. Winds are one of the factors in this. They'll remain light through the night, and that's going to help that fog to develop. By the time we hit the afternoon, though, the winds start to pick up again, and we're looking at winds out of the southwest about 20-30 kilometers per hour. So here's the forecast for tonight. Temperature sitting at minus 2 degrees around the Golden Horseshoe there, minus 3 in Mississauga, minus 1 as you head into the city of Toronto. And then as we move through tomorrow afternoon, we're looking at temperatures at 5 degrees with clearing sky cover. But one thing we are watching is a system that has yet to develop. It's down around the Colorado area. This could bring a mixed bag for Monday, starting with a couple centimeters, few centimeters of snow, switching over to rain. And that's, of course, when the kids are heading back to school. So you'll have to basically load them up with all of the winter clothes. 5-day forecast, 5 for tomorrow, minus 3 on Sunday, 2 on Monday with that mixed bag. A few showers on Tuesday, possible Wednesday. We're just back down below the 0 mark. Chris.
I'll take a cool down as long as there's sun.
Yeah, no doubt.
Thanks, Nick.
You bet.
6'7" forward from San Diego State, number 2, Kawhi Leonard.
The boos rained down on Raptors star Kawhi Leonard as he returned to San Antonio for the first time since the big trade to Toronto. It was also the first time DeMar DeRozan played against the Raptors, and boy, did he deliver. DeRozan did something last night he had never done with the Raps. He posted a triple-double. The Spurs won handily, 125-107. Toronto will get a redo when the Spurs come here on February 22nd. I have a feeling DeRozan will get a much better reception.
Nick Nurse, Greg Popovich. The 1-1 for Doncic. Batista with a drive. Deep left field. No doubt about it.
Would you like to own a piece of Toronto sports history? The home run ball that sent the city into a frenzy after Jose Bautista's bat flip is up for auction. It was posted to an American memorabilia site today from the man who caught the ball in the left field stands during Game 5 of the 2015 ALDS against the Texas Rangers. The opening bid, a whopping $3,500. So far, there's been 2 bids on it. It's now up to $4,200. Don't worry, you have plenty of time. Bidding ends on February 1st at 10 p.m. Eastern. Shattered and shrouded in mystery, Canadian archaeologists work to uncover the truth behind a 3,000-year-old statue in Turkey. We'll tell you about the significance right after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
A team of Canadian archaeologists is working to unravel an ancient mystery in southern Turkey. They're doing it as the conflict in neighboring Syria remains a constant threat. Now, after decades of digging, they've made a major discovery, one that could reveal the powerful role of women in the region's history. Neil Kuksal has that story.
I'm a little worried about putting the wood any further down because in case there's eyes.
Yeah. So that was very exciting. And when we said, wow, that is really quite stunning because no one had ever found anything like this before.
Try it. It's a risk, but I think we should do it, yeah.
Yep. It's a woman.
She is broken and more than a bit battered, but even in this state, her figure suggests a powerful past. Tim Harrison is leading the team trying to unravel her secrets.
Who was she?
Probably the either queen mother of the founder of the dynasty of Hittite rulers that controlled this region in the first millennium BC in what we call the Iron Age. When the king was away on battles or whatever, on campaigns, the Tamanana, or Queen Mother, would assume the control or the managing of the day-to-day affairs, including the political decision-making and so on of the community.
She is 3,000 years old. Her head and upper torso are about a meter long, carved into a ton of stone. Ringlets in a regal style, a shawl over her shoulders, head, and back. They'd already found her king years ago, but she may help rewrite history.
We said that like from day one. We said we were going to find the wife.
I think this discovery is going to force us to rethink maybe what our conventional wisdom has been about what we think the role of women. I think we tend to, get focused on often military or political history, which is, at least in the official historical records that we have, are dominated by male figures. And so we often lose a lot of this other part of the story.
Harrison's team is now developing a computer method to help reconstruct her. With the support of the Turkish Ministry of Culture, the statue is one of nearly 8,000 fragments they've unearthed so far at Tayinat. And the University of Toronto archaeologists believe this area once marked the entrance to a royal citadel. The dig site is in Hatay, in southern Turkey, where history is hidden, often in plain sight. The patchwork of rural land is peaceful, but the war in Syria is dangerously close.
I can say that we've never been threatened or had any concern about our safety. At the same time, yes, we are working right literally on the border, and so it is a constant concern. We believe that the conflicts that are deeply riven in this part of the world are deeply rooted in that ancient history.
The team is in talks to arrange a Canadian exhibition of these treasures. It's one of several projects Harrison is coordinating in the region.
They're between projects in Turkey and Syria and Lebanon, and even in the south in Israel.
Cooperation and a common purpose, perhaps a way to help reconnect a world divided. Nico Exal, CBC News, Toronto.
It's been a warmer than usual Friday in January, and that is making some problems for wine growers out in the Niagara region. We'll take you there right after the break. Ice wine season is in full swing, but one Niagara wine grower says this year has not been the best for growing.
We have days at 7 degrees like today. We have days at just 0. We have a lot of rain also. So yeah, it's not been the best conditions.
Some people like them, but due to the fluctuating temperatures, grapes aren't growing like they should. And to make great ice wine, temperatures need to be at least -8 or -10 for a couple of days.
Grapes are in great condition. Vidal has a thick skin, which helps with those conditions. It's still looking good.
The vineyard says they are hoping they'll be able to start picking grapes soon. And we haven't had a couple days of consistent weather for a while now.
I was going to say, they're probably some of the only people that want -8, -10 degrees.
Yeah, I'd rather not have.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't know. Did they say day was long enough?
No, I think it had to be a couple days in a row.
Okay, well, I don't know if I can do that for you. Tonight's going down to -3 degrees. We're not quite at that -8. Winds are going to start to calm down. That means the risk for some morning fog and possibly some freezing fog for the morning hours. That should clear out by the afternoon, 5 degrees. Now, I mentioned Sunday night, we're going down to about -11, -12. I was trying to help them out there.
So
but
one night
for one night,
growing ice wine.
But a mixed bag for Monday, though. So kids are going back to school, and of course, then you've got to get them with the snow boots and snow pants, and maybe even the rain boots and the rain pants by the time they're going home.
Well, they have a couple days to worry about that.
Yeah.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Mike Wise is up next with your next local newscast at 11 o'clock. Have a great weekend. Dwight Drummond is back on Monday.